All right. So, what games are we doing? No, don't hear me. So, thank you guys for coming to our second career speaker series of the year. Yay! Super awesome. Thank you guys for coming. So before all the introductions happen, just as an FYI, there's an EF tours where you can go to Ireland, England. I want to say Scotland. Not a good thing. Awesome. Thank you. You have the paper. I do not. If you want to know more about it, you should email Tracy King at tnking@dcc.edu. I believe the sign-up date is this Friday, so hurry up and get the email in. All right. So that's out the way. Everyone in here can grab a sheet on the way out. I'm happy to introduce you to Sia Karamalegos. Is that correct? Yes. Awesome. Cool. She is a web developer. Founder and lead developer of Clio and
Calliope.
Thank you for saying that because I say it different ways.
Oh yeah.
Embarrass myself.
We're in New Orleans, so I think I
know. She has a lot of information on, and obviously I just blocked out on it. Performance. I'm reading about your analytics stuff, accessibility, a lot of cool stuff on web dev. So I'm gonna turn over to Sia.
Hey everyone. Can y'all hear me good on the live stream also? Or just complain and then we'll hopefully see it, and I'll make sure that gosh, this is Windows, so there we go. I wanted to see that too. You can see my screen too online, right? Or if you can't, just say something in the chat. I figured it's a career series, right? So you're probably interested in what my career has been and what I'm doing now. So should I start from the beginning? I figured I'd start from the beginning because I've changed a lot. I'm older than I look. So in undergrad, I did chemical engineering. So I got my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and I specialized in microelectronics stuff. So like wafer, silicon microchip fabrication. And then that's what I actually did for 3.5 years after undergrad. I worked at National Semiconductor as a process engineer in a wafer fab. So yeah, it was process engineering. I mean, if you have questions about that, you can ask me too. Lots of things. I couldn't figure out what I wanted in undergrad. First, I was a chemistry major, and I was like, maybe I'll be math. But then I was like, I don't want to be an actuary, so no. So I switched to engineering, and if I did it all over again, maybe I would do computer science or electrical engineering. But whatever, it already happened. So then I worked for 3.5 years as a process engineer, and I knew that I wanted to learn more about business and stuff like that because I didn't get any of that in undergrad. So I went and got my MBA, and then after that, I worked. It's hard to switch too many things at once when you kind of switch careers usually, or especially after school like that, or at least in this case. I wouldn't say everything is like that, but so I worked in semiconductor capital equipment, so like the equipment that's used in factories for making microchips. And I worked in product marketing, but this is like B2B marketing, and in corporate strategy. So I was really into strategy and operations for a while. After that, I was a management consultant for a few years, which is great because you like learn a lot of things quickly in terms of business and strategy, but then you have like no life, and yeah, you're like flying Monday through Friday, and when you're home, you just want to be home. And it was, it was not fun in that regard, but you do learn a lot in a short amount of time. So
I'm gonna pause you for a second.
Yeah.
They're not seeing video.
Troubleshooting? Well, there's not really any video. I have my website showing in case we want to show stuff in a bit. But yeah.
I'll see if I can hook it up. You keep talking?
Yeah. Well, there's no there's no actual video. We're just screen sharing. Sometimes you can't do both, though.
Yeah, I don't think they're even seeing this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll keep talking because you can sit there if you want. Since this part's not really, there's no visual aids for this part. Oh, because it was just sharing a window and not like a whole screen.
There we go. Okay. You're golden.
Yeah, so I did management consulting, but it was kind of depressing after a while. So I was like, what do I want to do with my life? I've always told myself, or we had this one case in business school. It was called like the profiles of the class of 1978 or something like that. And what they did was every year they asked, or every time they were going to have a reunion, which was every 5 years, they asked the alumni, like, you know, how are their lives going and things like that. So in the beginning, like, you know, right after business school, everyone's super excited. They're like, I got this amazing job and everything's nice. And then as they go through time and you read these profiles, they get more and more depressing. They're like, you know, my children hate me, my, you know, wife or husband hates me. I feel like I've done nothing with my life, even though, like, you know, they're making millions of dollars, but their lives weren't fulfilling. So I made a promise to myself after reading that depressing case that I would make sure that I kind of like reevaluated what was making me happy in my life all the time. So while I learned a lot in consulting, I decided to change because that was not fun. So it took me a while to figure out. Plus, it was like right when the downturn happened, like the really big downturn. So I think I was unemployed for like maybe a year. But what I ended up doing was I went into public education here in New Orleans. So that's actually what brought me to New Orleans originally. I was a project manager for like a big project we had at First Line Schools. And then I became like the director of data also. So I kind of like managed the state reporting and then all the data systems and stuff at the school system. And that was great. I worked in education for a few years. But what was funny was like on the side, I kept coming back to coding. So to get into the engineering school I went to Texas A&M undergrad. To get into the engineering school, you had to take 2 classes before they'd accept you. And one was like AutoCAD, and the other was it was like Fortran 90 because I'm old. That was like an intro to Fortran. I know, it's really old. And I like aced that class. I was also like the only one in both of those classes, and they all hated me, but whatever. But I aced it because I was like super anal and whatever. Apparently that's good in software because you have fewer bugs. But so that was cool. But you know, like traditional education for a while there, you would have to like go to like a community college or something if you wanted to learn more things. And I think I did at one time. Like in Arlington, I went to community college there to learn about like circuitry and stuff like that, like electronics. But then finally, they started coming out with like these massive online open enrollment courses, you know, like edX and MIT and Khan Academy, and Khan Academy was actually after a little bit. But then later like Code School and Code Academy, and I kept coming back to those on the side. Like I took one that was basically a Python class. I think that was MITx. And then there was this thing called Startup Weekend we used to have in New Orleans. We haven't had one in a while. And I did that. It's fun. It's like this short weekend. I know that's fun. You use your entire weekend for this, so that part's not fun. It's fun to do it once or twice, and you have like a startup idea, and maybe you do mock-ups and things like that. And my team did really well. We ended up winning. And one of the things was like half off of this one boot camp. And so I was like, well, maybe I should just do this in real life. If I keep coming back on the side, like maybe that's a sign that this is what I would be more motivated to do. So that's what I did. I took one boot camp and it wasn't deep enough, so then I took another boot camp. So I've done 2 coding boot camps, and then I started teaching also, like, you know, introduction. That was like Ruby on Rails, and then basic web like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But then I went deeper and I started teaching myself React, which is a front-end framework for web development that uses JavaScript and other things. And eventually I got a job as, they have like this apprenticeship program at Revelry Labs. It's a local web dev shop. So I did that for a while, and I guess I graduated from that and became an actual employee, and I worked there for a bit, and then it wasn't a good fit for me personally, so I left. And this gets back to like, I'm older and I've done lots of other jobs for a while, so I decided to just freelance for a while. And because, so this is part where like some of my privilege helps. Like I saved a lot in those old jobs, and also when my dad passed away, I got some other income from that. So I want to be very honest about what freelancing is like. Like it sounds all free and happy, but it's like income isn't stable. So I know for me, I've benefited from the fact that I've had these other things that help me get through that. But yeah, so that's where I'm at now. I am a freelance web developer. I still do web development. I prefer front end now. Originally, I preferred back end. I like SQL and just back end, like Ruby on Rails was fun. But ever since React came out and I kind of learned about component architecture and like functional programming concepts that we use now sometimes in front end, I liked that. And I also like thinking about user experience and what makes sense for them. Even though I'm a developer and not a designer, I still think those things are important, and I like thinking about that, like basically in terms of jobs to be done. Part of this is also my process engineering and my business experience, like thinking of like what's going to benefit this person the most and how do I deliver that. So I like all of those things. I still end up doing full stack because I have clients, like one client was like Python and a lot of SQL, and one is I still have to manage the backend, which is Ruby on Rails. But then the front end is React and stuff like that. But yeah, so I'm a web developer, but I also speak at conferences and stuff and teach workshops. The conference industry is really interesting in tech. It's, or at least in front end. So I was like, you can learn a lot at conferences and they're nice, but they're expensive to go to, right? You have to pay for the travel, you have to pay for the conference itself, which can be several $100s. And as a freelancer, I can't afford that. I don't work for like Google and they're not like paying my way the whole way. So I was like, how can I do that for free? So I started speaking at conferences because a lot of the conferences pay for, if you're a speaker, they pay for your travel and whatnot. And so like your airfare and hotel. And then I also got started working with this other set of conferences that pays for speaking and workshops. Actually, most of the time when I teach a workshop, I only teach a workshop if I get paid because it's like a full day. That's a lot of work to just do it out of goodwill. So I get paid for those. So I basically split my time and income between actual web development and speaking and teaching. And then because I like to focus on web performance, and I want to also break out into web accessibility too, because I feel like these two things are things that from day-to-day developers at a shop or at a company, maybe they don't invest as much time in those things because they're just trying to ship features. They're just trying to make their application work. And so they're not prioritized, but they are both very important. And so if I specialize in those areas, so basically, can I become more niche in what I serve and then get a bigger market for the services that I provide? So I'm also working on writing a book on web performance. You don't really make a lot of money from writing tech books, but they're kind of like a fancy business card, like, oh, hey, look, I know something because I wrote this book. So it's like a credibility thing. Or maybe also like you took the time to do all of this, so you must know something. And then maybe write online or record online workshops too. And so those will be other income streams. I feel like it's a lot easier to just work for a company, but I like doing lots of things. I have this problem with crafting as well. Like, I'm crafting my Mardi Gras costumes, and I have like all these other projects going on at once. I don't know. I just like to be like intellectually stimulated all the time. And a lot of developer jobs, you're like either you're a developer 100% of the time, or just like 100% coding. But I kind of like maybe tapping into multiple parts of my brain. I like doing that. I have realized, like when I was teaching, I felt like I wasn't doing enough of that. But then when I'm a developer, I feel like, oh, but I still like I do like helping people understand concepts and things. So I still like teaching and speaking for that. So the way I've done the balance of that is to be a freelancer who then, of course, then I can't. You can also, there's another job inside tech so we know about web development design. I'm assuming almost everyone in here knows about this and online knows about web development. But there's also a set of jobs called like DevRel, or developer relations or developer advocates. And so a lot of the companies like that have APIs, or for example, Amazon, I think they're doing like an AWS thing at the same time. People work there as developer advocates. And what you do is you try to, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of different ways they split out the jobs, but you're kind of a connection between the users, like the developer users, and like the API or whatever the service is that is sold to developers. And so your job is to like to understand that tech and maybe write helpful articles and things like that, but also to speak at conferences and interact with developers. So there's also that kind of job as well inside web development. But usually you're a developer for a bit before you would jump into that kind of a role. But the problem with those is like I'm always afraid that I won't be building enough too. Like I still like to build things. But yeah, that was. I don't think I ever taught for that long at once. I was asking for questions, but maybe I'll stop talking now. And like things that y'all are interested in, I can talk on. Like if you have a specific question, I'll go deeper in those areas because I feel like I'm here for you anyways. I can pontificate on the things that I do. This is my website. That's what I'm sharing. I need to actually get to that screen. So.
Yeah, good question.
Oh yeah, where is that screen? Yeah. There we go. So when I scroll, they should see this, right? Yep. Like, so this is my homepage. We can also dive into like actual tech. So I have like my upcoming talks and workshops. I did one last night, so it's not updated. But I have several other conferences, and you can see the ones with like lots of talks. Those are the paid ones because I only do usually 1 or 2 talks. The ones that are not paid. But yeah. Okay, yes.
So what does the industry look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
For web development. So the question, if you're online, you couldn't hear, he said, what does the industry look like in the next 5 to 10 years? I don't know if I
just based off like
what I think. Yeah. So what I think, which may not be right. All right, this is an opinion. I'm willing to accept it. I am sometimes wrong. There's a couple of interesting things in web development. I will say, so just because most of y'all are learning and stuff, I will say once you learn one language really well, it becomes a lot easier to learn other languages. So don't get like too caught up in like, oh my God, like which one am I going to learn? I don't know if that's an option here because like every institution is different. But once you learn one, you can learn more. And the ability to learn is probably the most important thing for your job, the ability to keep learning. What I will say is this industry changes a lot. Front end has changed immensely in the last like probably 5 years. It used to be a lot easier to do front end and now it's a lot harder. So some things change so fast that really what smart employers, what they look for is your ability to learn and problem solve. So those are the key skills they're gonna look for. Can you do it well in whatever language you're already in? And then, so now like looking forward, what do I think are some of the big things that are happening? I think front end is still going to be complicated. I do think accessibility is going to become more and more important. So if you do web development, that's like understanding, well, make sure you learn HTML. So a lot of developers get caught up in like whatever language, like if you're front end, you're probably JavaScript, right? But like HTML and CSS are still very important. Don't forget those. But accessibility is going to become more and more important, and we see that with like that Domino's case. Do you know about the Domino's case? They were sued because their like some pizza builder thing wasn't accessible, and then they fought. It's actually dumb. The case is actually like the ability to sue them. So they spent all this money to fight this case just for the ability to sue them that they could have just spent on their app and making it accessible. So eventually you should learn that. But anyways, so that's one thing. The other really big thing that I think is happening is serverless architecture. And so when we write web applications specifically, I talk more about that. I don't do like native apps as much. But when we do web applications, usually you have like your front end stuff is your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make it interactive, and then you might have back end stuff as well. Like maybe there's an actual back end server, like a Ruby on Rails app or a Node app, or I don't know Java and those things, but yeah, like those things, and that handles like interfacing with your database and handling routing and doing other tasks, right? And then you have to put that somewhere right? Like either you have your own server that serves it, or you put it in the cloud, which is just other people's servers. So like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Netlify, Heroku, which uses AWS in the background. And so that part, like working on that stuff, is called DevOps usually, and it hasn't been easy over the years. And so I think what's starting to happen is people are recognizing that. And have you ever heard of like Clay Christensen's, what is it called? I guess I can Google it. Oh my God, I don't know why people are calling. Stop. Clay Christensen. Christmas ornaments. Disruptive innovation. So this is the thing, like when things start getting like too expensive or too difficult, usually some like a company that just provides like super basic stuff will come up and disrupt them. And eventually they end up taking over the whole market, right? And so I think that's what started to happen with DevOps, is because it's been too hard. This is my opinion. This is clearly my opinion. But there is a lot of growth in like what we call serverless. And so what it is, for example, on AWS, there's this tool called Amplify. I actually know the developer advocate for that. And it's really cool. It's like with some commands on the command line, you can like set up your entire, I don't want to call it the back end, because it's like, it's your front end. Like they actually have a lot of tutorials for using Gatsby and GraphQL. If you have a back end, it will set up the Amazon version of a database, which I think is like a NoSQL database. And it will set up your, I think it sets up your certificates and things like that. So like for your DNS server, I forgot what that product is called. They have like a million different products in AWS. So making all of that easier, I think, is a big thing, which is starting to cut out a bit of DevOps, and it's starting to eat in a little bit into back-end engineering. So front-end engineers are starting to like, because we're doing a lot more like API-based stuff and things like that. I don't think back-end will go away. And then the other thing on the front end is like WYSIWYG type builders. You know, like, well, there's still WordPress, but like Wix and things like that. I think those will still keep getting better. So creating basic websites should get easier with time. But honestly, like, it's easier for me to just write HTML and CSS than to deal with one of those, because I've gotten so used to it. So yeah, I think there will always be disruptors. So the ability to learn, I think, and learn new skills. And you kind of learn, like, as you're working, you figure out what you like and you start gravitating to those areas. So if you can figure out what you like and then learn those areas better, then that always works. And align that with someone who's willing to hire in that area always helps. I will say also locally, the dev market, local companies don't pay as much as companies outside of New Orleans. It's almost like we're a low-cost country. So if you love to stay in New Orleans, it's harder to do this as your first job as a developer. But if you can work remotely for a company that's based somewhere else, but be in New Orleans, usually you can have a higher income. It might be harder as your first job. As your first job, people want you to be more like hands-on, so they can, you know, basically support you better and whatnot. But yeah, and I will say that getting your first developer job is harder, but once you have that first one, it seems to be a lot easier. Yes.
So we have a question from the chat.
Yeah.
Lacey Sarney says that she can relate to being super into details and also has many projects going on at once.
Yes.
So she wants to know.
How do you finish any of them?
Yeah. Well, do you have any tips on how to not overload?
Oh yeah. Yeah, eventually you have to start saying no, either to people or to yourself. Can you hear that noise?
Yeah.
I know, it's like, is something about to explode?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Sorry, there's a weird, if you're online, you probably can't hear it, but there's a weird noise. It is hard. I will say you'll eventually have to just prioritize. I hope that's not for my shoes. I'm sorry, I left a mess down here. Yeah, prioritizing. So I think there's a couple of things I do, I think, that help me manage myself better. So every morning, if you've ever heard of The Artist's Way, it's by Julia Cameron, and it's this book. It's actually more than 25 years old now, I think. It could be way more than that too. But it was about getting in touch with your creativity and things like that. And one of the things it suggested was to write morning pages. So like when you wake up in the morning, before you do anything, you just write 3 pages. And it's not like creative writing. It's just like, just write what comes in your head, like stream of consciousness. You're not really supposed to stop. You're not supposed to do other things before. So I do that. And then to keep myself appreciative and happy, I also wrote like the three joys that I had within like the last 24 hours. And then the other thing I do is before I ever get on the computer or anything, I try to say, you know, what are the things I need to get done today? And then occasionally like take a step back and like, what are the things strategically or that are the most important for me, like, you know, right now over the next several months, and try to prioritize those projects and not any other projects. So like, for example, this is my personal website, which I finally finished maybe October, November, I kind of forgot. But that took a lot of effort. And it's really intimidating too, because especially as a web developer, you're like, oh, what should my design be? What font should I use? What colors? And it takes forever. I actually wrote like a silly blog post about it. It's on this website. You go to blog, it's like the most recent one. But so you get kind of like wrapped up in all those details, but it's good to just get it done. And I will say as a developer to get hired, it's not just like, you know, I completed this education, I have this thing that says I did it and I have grades. It's like, what have you built? The most important thing is just to build things. Even if you think they're terrible and whatnot, just build things. I have a lot of CodePens. Have you heard of CodePen? It's like codepen.io, I think. I'm not logged into this computer, but I'll at least go to codepen.io. I think it's .io. So I have a lot of like really crappy pens on here too. like if I don't want to build like a whole website, there's some really cool stuff on here actually. I don't even know what this is, but I'll just click on it. But it has, you know, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So you can play in here with things and without building a whole project and just have several of those and like point to them and stuff. This is actually not a portfolio page. Like I have my talks and I have my blog, but there's not like my portfolio projects on there. I have a GitHub account. I forgot this stuff is down here. And like people can see, it's funny, people will look on here and they're like, oh, you must be a developer, you have all this stuff. But I mean, whatever, this just means you wrote a commit and people can fake it too. So I would say if you're a developer, if you don't know Git or GitHub, companies are usually like, I mean, are you a developer? So learn that. It's just like one of those skills that helps you on the side. But yeah, focus on completing one thing, especially like if you have a personal website. If you complete this and it's like you can write blog posts, then you're going to be more likely to actually write blog posts. And that helps too, like writing posts, even as you're learning. Dev.to, do you know about Dev.to? That's I have a thing on there. That actually is very beginner friendly. It's kind of like Medium. But if I go to my homepage or just the homepage, there's tons of articles. There's tons of articles every day, and a lot of them are beginner articles. So don't be afraid to write about your learning process and like, oh, I'm learning about this right now, and you know, this is what I got from it, and this was the result. I mean, you can check out all the posts on there, but it's especially I feel like beginner or junior dev friendly. So like once you have that, like your personal page, what I do is the canonical URLs are my blog. So, but then I cross post on dev.to, and then when you do that, I can't show because I'm not logged in, but you can set a canonical URL. This is an SEO thing. You should only have one copy of something on the internet. You can have multiple copies, but the copies have to say that the original content is at this other URL, and then you won't get penalized by search engines. So you can post on multiple things. So I have my own thing, so I own my own content, but then I also post on dev.to. So like having something set up like either a portfolio page / blog page, and then you can actually put things on it and then do side projects. But that's the first part, like what's most important, and take some time to rank that on the side and yeah, figure that out. I don't know if that was helpful, but I tried. I'm not also craft-wise, I'm not allowing myself to start new craft projects till I finish a few. Yeah.
When did you know you were skilled enough to become a freelancer?
Oh yeah, that's a tough one. So I will say, when you're like a developer in a job at a company, you need to be good at development. If you're a freelancer, you also have to do marketing, sales, accounting, finance, and some strategy. I mean, in your general life strategy, it should be important, like learning how to think about like what's going to get me to where, strategic thinking. You don't have to take a class in that, but because I have taken several from business school that helped. But it needs a lot more skills. I think it also depends on if you have contacts or potential clients already. That helps, because I don't actually do advertising, but like the blog is kind of advertising in a way. It's pull. It's not pull for our clients that don't know about development. It's pull for like other dev shops or developers that might need to hire extra help, you know, because none of this is targeted to the end user. So I will say, if you already have, you can do some stuff on the side too at some jobs. Definitely look at your contracts when you sign up, because some of them don't allow you to have side projects. They consider that like, I don't know if it's like conflict of interest, but for the dev shop, they're less likely to let you do that on the side because it's kind of like competition. If you're working in a place like GE or like Auctioner or a company you're not making projects for multiple clients, it's just that one, often those will let you still do side projects. And if you can do that and get some clients on the side, and then you'll kind of be able to tell, like, you know, when do I have enough? What's my income like? Can I survive some instability for a while? And I will say, as long as you're working too, it doesn't necessarily look bad that you're a freelancer on the side. Like, say you work for like 2 or 3 years and you're like, I want to try out this freelancing thing for a while. It's not like you had no job. As long as you're still building stuff and you can show things, it doesn't necessarily look bad to someone that's going to hire you. I don't think I get as many of those, like a lot of developers talk about how recruiters are always contacting them on LinkedIn. I think because it says like, I don't know, CEO and whatever of Clio and Calliope, so they don't contact me as much because they're like, oh, you don't want a job. But I get a few of those occasionally. So yeah. Yeah, well, this is my personal site. I do have the Clio and Calliope site, but that's my LLC I created to better manage my freelancing business. And I have a designer that works with me, but we're technically both independent. But yeah, was that as helpful?
Yeah.
I think doing stuff on the side and kind of bridging that a little bit. Yeah, sometimes your first few projects, you're not going to be able to sell as high. I will say the designers that I know that are freelancers have been getting booked up their time has been getting booked up a lot. Or maybe I don't want all projects, so I actually say no to some potential clients. I don't do WordPress. I never learned it on purpose because I just don't want to do that. But I recognize not everyone can do that. I do think there's lots of WordPress work, but it doesn't get paid as well as other web development. It's still web development. It's just like a specific area. But the designers I know are really killing it. I have an opinion on this. It's that maybe developers and shops don't value designers as much, so then they don't hire them full time, but then they need to keep contracting with them because design is actually very important. But yeah, if you don't spend enough time on the design up front, then yeah, and user testing and things like that, you're just going to build the wrong thing and end up spending way more money than if you just looked at design first before you start any code.
So I got a question
Yeah.
about
Mm-hmm.
that. So you say designers are getting booked and stuff like that. I know we offer a web design concentration, but before you kind of like get into the concentration specific stuff, which tend to be, if I'm not mistaken, because I did not go through that one, design specific.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, everyone has to learn Java. Everyone has to learn basic coding.
Oh, they make them learn coding before they can go into design specifically.
I mean, you kind of move around in it. But
yeah, I feel like graphic design would be a better intro for design, web design.
Yeah, my question is basically like how much
or art.
How much do you find designers actually do coding stuff versus
just
strictly designers?
It varies a lot. I feel like before front end got so crazy, I don't know, this might not be right. I feel like more designers then still maybe wrote CSS and some HTML. But now I know a lot of designers that don't really code at all. So Glennis is the one on my website. She's freelances and she's booked up like almost constantly. She did a boot camp and did Ruby on Rails. So she learned that first, and then she worked at Rackspace for a while. And so like as a developer at a big company, and she realized that she liked design more, so she started gravitating to that area. And when we worked together, we realized that she hates coding. I love design. I hate doing it because I'm like, oh my God, I can't make decisions. I get too wrapped up. It took me like, I don't know how many iterations to come up with the colors and the fonts for the stupid website, which design is way more than that, but just as an example. So we agreed to like, for us, we split like, she literally just does like mock-ups and she uses like Sketch and other programs. What is it?
XD?
I think she starts with Sketch and then she puts it into this other program. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can also open my computer and look. And then it actually dumps some CSS out just from like the way she builds it, which is nice. And then I would build the whole thing. And then like at Revelry, for example, the designers were just doing, well, they were doing design and CSS, but not really much more than that, like SCSS. So I feel like learning HTML and CSS is helpful for designers or in education, but like Java, no, I would never make a designer learn Java. Maybe some basics of JavaScript, but it's not needed for design. I think what's more important is like graphic design concepts and user concepts, like user testing. Like there's some cool stuff online. Like I bought this book called, it's like I think it's a thing in art school, but it's something about the grid. If I could log into my Amazon account, it's like making and breaking the grid. And so it's like it's like these kinds of things you need to know, but also user things. Yeah, so I guess I would disagree with the people that made, oh yeah, that's the picture of it. There's also like thinking with type and all these kinds of things, but yeah, I'm very interested in these things. I think because I also have that kind of like creative side, so I dive into that stuff, but I don't do that as part of my job. I just learn about it, or I do it for my own website. Like I design my own website, but for a client, I would usually suggest, hey, get a designer, and then I'll implement those things. Unless they have like no money, and then I'll give you the engineering version of design. But yeah, more questions.
Well, if you were to, you know, this is hypothetical, of course. If you were to design a course, what would be part of your curriculum for that course on design?
Oh yeah, well, see, I'm not an actual designer, but and then so for the website, I dove so deep into color theory. Like there's just so much to learn, and that's actually very scientific and mathematical. Because like color values, like a yellow is like its natural brightness is much higher than like a blue, which looks darker. And so like trying to make those values equal on a site to make a color palette, you can't just grab some color palette because that would look terrible if you applied it to a website. You have to learn about values and like saturations and things like that. And then typography is like a whole concept too. I'd probably just look at what other universities are doing and then talk to designers, experienced designers, say what was helpful for them. And then like some underlying, or I would say HTML and CSS, because that is something that they might have to do. And maybe JavaScript is optional, because design is usually just front end. Java is a back end language. It's never used on the front end. Yeah. It's my opinion. I am sorry for whoever I'm disagreeing with. Yeah, I can introduce you to some of those designers that are like, there's two of them I know that are like pretty solid designer freelancers. And then I know other designers around town that work at companies if you want, like as part of your career speaking series. And I know developers too. There's one that focuses on machine learning a lot. So if y'all are interested in that, I can introduce you to him. He's she want like varied tracks and stuff.
And we'll say we have traditional 3 questions if you're ready for them.
Sure. Okay.
So it's basically a 3-parter.
Yep.
Think back to high school,
Yeah.
graduation, 3
Mhm.
months out. You're done with high school. You're looking ahead.
Uh-huh.
Who were you about 3 months after, high school graduation? Who are you now? And then who do you want to be in 5 years?
Oh, so the first part of the question is who was I in
Yeah.
3 months after
Yeah,
graduation
who are you
in high
after
school?
graduation versus who are you now versus who do you want to be in 5 years?
Okay. Is there like any aspect of this to focus on?
Career, life.
At least
goals.
at that time, I do think everyone's different. But even though I grew up with like not much money, and then at the time I went to college was way cheaper than it is now because I went in 1995, and I think my tuition for I was also in-state tuition in Texas, and I only paid like $1,200 for like my tuition. That's like nothing, right? Is that might be cheaper than community college too. I have no idea what it costs now to go full time.
6,000 at least.
Yeah. So like out of control incomes they're different from 1995, but they are not that extremely different of what tuition is like now. So I had always assumed I would go to college, and then like when I graduate from college, my mom finally told me, she was like, "You were the first one to graduate from college in your family." I had no idea. I just assumed it. So this is like part of that privilege of like I had a supportive family, and I always just assumed I would go, right? So like in my head, I was like, I've always been a driven person too. So I'm like, yeah, I'm driven. I'm going to college. I got accepted to Texas A&M, and I went. Maybe I was nervous. I do remember being nervous after college. I don't remember being nervous going into college. I don't know why.
Why were you nervous after college?
Oh, it's that whole like, oh my God, I have to actually like earn an income now, and I'm moving to this other city, and yeah, you're like, I gotta be an adult now. You're like excited because you're like, I'm tired of being in debt, but then you're like, but you have to be an adult. It was fine. But yeah, I also panicked when I got into business school because I didn't say this earlier, but I went to Harvard for business school. And so I'm like this person, I grew up in Texas. I'm from the South. I'm half Greek, so that's the name. So like I have really weird dynamics in my family because it's like half immigrant and half like Southern white person. It's like really weird. But yeah, so I get into Harvard and I'm like, oh my God, because like at that time, that was 2003, so I think the annual student budget was $60,000, which is way lower than it is now, not just from tuition, but like living expenses and stuff. So that included like tuition, living expenses. But I did get a big grant there because apparently a lowly engineer makes nothing compared to like bankers and consultants. So I will say don't shortchange your dreams. Like I only applied to Harvard because my coworkers were applying. Like I was going to apply. I was in Arlington, Texas at the time, so I was going to apply to like University of Dallas and University of Texas at Arlington. My coworkers were applying to like UCLA and Stanford, and I was like, well, I'm just going to apply to whatever I think is the best school. And then I got in, so it was like I started as a joke. I actually got in, so I had to go. But I panicked because I was like, oh, I'm going to sound stupid because I have a Southern accent and all this money. And it was like scary and stuff, but it's fine. Yeah. It was way more money than my undergrad. My undergrad did get more expensive as I went there over the 4 years, but still not like it is today. Oh yeah, the whole cost of education is a major problem right now. Yeah. And then how teaching and adjunct professors are paid also is like I don't understand. But yeah. I forgot. Okay, so I did the high school. We branched off into like other times I panicked.
Who are you now?
And
where do you see yourself going? So like an interview.
Right now, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Apparently that does not go away. So just like be comfortable with it. Think of it as the journey, right? But I do think I am a web developer who's focused on performance or just web. I would say I'm very strong into web because web is weird, like browser differences and stuff like that. And I'm trying to go more niche so that I can get more income from various streams, and also because I'm this like basically a specialist, get pull from that. So that's me now. While still on the side doing my fun things like crafting. And then where do I want to be? When? What's next?
5 years for
5,
wherever you see
10
yourself
years?
going.
That's so hard. I've always failed that question all the time. I feel like I can look out like maybe 2 years max and like what my goal is, but 5 years, I'm like, I don't know, maybe something else is important to me at that time.
Go for 2 years then.
Yeah. So I'm like, because I'm like, I eventually want to have a family, and I haven't found a partner, so I'm like, whatever, I could do that on my own. And so maybe I'll adopt, but I'm like, I have a 1-bedroom apartment right now, so it's not happening right now. I got to figure out when that's going to happen. And then because I think family is important, I want to make sure that I am there for that person too. So that was the other part of like management consulting, another sad story. There were all men in my office in Dallas, and then we had this like outing at the baseball park, and I don't know, we had like our own room, and I sat down at a table, and like all the wives sat with me, I guess because I'm a woman, so they sat with me. And then I'm hearing all these sob stories about like, yeah, I didn't make little Johnny go to school today because it was like bring daddy to school today, and you know he's never in town. So it's like all these sob stories. So I'm like, I don't ever want to be that family where I want to try to be there more. Actually, like my mom wasn't around because she had to work. She was a single, parent, and had to work to support us. So I want to try to be there more for that person. So I do actually think freelancing helps me in that regard, but I have to get those various income streams to make sure that it's enough to support the family. So that's, I guess, more my future outlook. And then, maybe I'll become some weird crafting diva that sells lots of things online. I do have I have 2 Etsy shops actually. It's kind of fun to do things on the side because you learn more. So I sell crochet patterns. That started a long time ago on Etsy. I started selling some other things too. But even though I don't make much money from that, I end up learning a lot about, I learned in the beginning, I learned more about social media and promoting and how to sell online. Even though I wasn't, I'm not making much money from that, it's fun to do those things because you learn some of these concepts. Yeah. And then that helps me, I mentioned in here, I didn't mention it verbally, but if you have Twitter, I'm the Green Greek on Twitter. And so for speaking, I actually am one of those people that's I think social media is mostly bad, and I deleted my Facebook account, but I kept Twitter because that's how I get more awareness and followers and potential clients and conferences to find me. So I kind of manage that more, but I probably started learning about that for Etsy shop. Oh, and you can sell things that you don't actually have to work on every time someone buys. So it's it's a PDF. I don't sell finished items. I sell patterns. So you write it once, and then it just sells. It manages itself. So those are things. I'm like, how can we make passive income like that? That's my goal. Is how can I just have passive income like that, where you make it once and it just keeps selling. I have a coloring book also. Every once in a while, I'll get this thing from Amazon that's we deposited $3.71 in your account. And I'm like, oh, someone bought a coloring book this quarter.
That's a good idea. Engineer income, why not?
I feel like you learn stuff from it, but yeah, it's print on demand, I guess. Yeah. More questions, or did I answer all of those?
You got our 3. I don't know if there's any more questions.
Oh, feel free to well, I'm Sia.codes. There's a way, if you feel free, there's various social media. They're not really social media. They're more GitHub and stuff like that. Twitter is an easy way to contact me. There is a contact form on here. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Oh, dev.to, also you can comment on articles there. Those other things aren't really very, LinkedIn. Yeah.
I guess one last question.
Yeah.
Since you're speaking of social media and freelancers, and I know just from hearing other faculty talk about it, students often say oh yeah, I want to, start my own business or freelance when I'm done with this. How important do you find
All that stuff is hard. Yeah, I actually, while you were asking that question, I also thought of this other thing. Like managing your online presence and in-person presence. I will say, if you want to be a web developer or designer in New Orleans, like start going to the meetups and stuff. I also co-organize GDG New Orleans. So every Tuesday we have, it's called Hack Night, and it's at the Ace Hotel. It's basically in the lobby bar. It's not really hacking. It's just developers socializing in a bar. You don't have to drink. People don't pressure you or anything like that. And then they have this thing called the Three Keys Lounge behind it, which is, it looks like a little comedy club. And every week it kind of alternates each week per month. There's No Fun, which is functional programming. They'll have a talk. NolaSec is security. CDG New Orleans is just general web development. And Front End Party is front end. And so going to these meetups, you can learn from it. Even if you don't understand it all, eventually it will start absorbing and you'll understand it. It's fine. Interacting with people before you need a job. Also managing your LinkedIn before you need a job. Do these things, like don't wait and do them at the last second, or your resume. It's a lot easier if you just start building it, and then each time you have some sort of change or you have accomplished something, add on to it. And then networking in person. I will say in New Orleans, I think it's easier than other cities. There's not as much pressure here. As long as you just show up and just be friends with people. Don't try to push yourself, like don't be like, oh, hey, I'm looking for a job. Maybe like meet people, understand them, like talk about nerdy things, like whatever's like your interest area, and then they just know you. And then when they're looking for a job, then you can get one. I will share, there's this NOLA Dev Slack organization. It's basically like developers and designers in New Orleans area. And you can invite yourself. I need to find that invite link. Actually, I can find it on my phone and I'll type it on the screen so that everyone can see it. There's a jobs channel in there too. So like when things, someone's hiring locally and they have someone in this Slack, then they will post it there. So if you go to this website, you can put your email address in and you can invite yourself basically. .heroku.com. There's a mixture of people, like experienced developers, junior developers, people going through boot camps, people in computer science programs. So there's a wide variety of people in there. This is a Heroku app, so it has to spin up. That's why it took so long. So if you go to this site, you just add your email. And then just start interacting. It helps. So that kind of like networking thing. Yeah, in other cities, people are more like, what's your job? What are you doing? But here it's more like, oh, hey, let's just get to know each other. I mean, people will ask what you're doing, but you can be like, oh, I'm in school. And they'll be like, oh, cool. Like, what are you studying? Like, what do you want to do? So, yeah. I think I answered that question. I kind of forgot the original question.
Any other questions?
Oh, and social media helps for mainly more external, but if you're trying to focus in a region, definitely meet people in person. And for freelancing, it helps if you maintain a presence online that's targeted to those people. So like if I want to start reaching out to end users, I should have a separate website and maybe write posts that are targeted to them. Like, what are the top 3 things you can do to increase, search engine optimization, or like stuff like that. How to get clients to find your website.
Any other questions?
Thanks for coming. I hope that was helpful.
I guess we'll wrap up and have, if people want to go one-on-ones, but I just want to say,
yeah, sure.
Thank you for coming. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
talking to people, answering all of our questions, from the really good ones that y'all provided to the crazy ones I give. So I just want to give you a little gift bag and some water.
Oh, wow. You didn't have to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, and thank you guys for coming.
Oh, cool. Thanks for sharing that link on there. Yeah, thanks, y'all. Feel free to ask me more questions later if you think of them. Just contact me on the line. Sorry, I say that to be funny on the line.